and good morning. Welcome to the Daily Geeky Pastimes podcast, episode number 43. I hope you're doing well. I'm excited today because it's Diablo launch day. In case you couldn't tell, I'm just kind of a little bit hyped for it. Oh, my things are a bit loose. That's weird. I hope you're all doing very, very well. We've got the gaming news from the 1st of June 2023. We're already in June, which is the passing of time is continually surprising to me, which is weird because it's, the only completely constant thing, but still shocking, still shocking. So we've got loads of news to get through today, so we're going to get started straight away. First of all, Street Fighter 6 is launching tomorrow. And one of the things we didn't talk about it when we talked about Street Fighter 6 the other day and all the reviews and how amazing it looks and all that sort of stuff, well, it's two things. First of all, apparently, so there's a campaign mode in Street Fighter 6. Some of you might know this. I've talked before about how in the beta I was a little bit disappointed. When you played versus mode, I went into campaign mode first, and I was surprised that the performance was bad. It looked like it was running like 30 frames a second, which really isn't good for a fighting game. And then I went over into the versus mode and it was running at 60 frames a second. And I was like, oh, this is what I want from Street Fighter. Something really snappy and it feels really responsive. And I was like, kind of disappointed because the campaign mode with all the open world stuff and the character creator seemed super cool. And I was like, it's weird if the performance is bad. And then all the reviews came out and I was like, oh, no one's mentioned the performance. Maybe they fixed it. So I left a comment saying, hey, has this been fixed from the beta? Is it better than the beta was? And somebody was like, oh, in the beta, you could just switch it to 60 frames a second. But it was like the default was 30. I was like, what? And apparently it's true that like in the Street Fighter 6, when you load up the campaign mode, it just defaults to 30 frames a second, as if anyone is like, yeah, that's how I want to play this fighting game. Like, that just seems utterly bizarre to me. Maybe there's some reason people who are super into fighting games like it. I can imagine, if you're doing frame-specific stuff, then having something at 30 frames a second is twice as easy as 60 frames a second. But still, just seemed a little bit odd to me. But anyway, that isn't even what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about was that Street Fighter 6 has this simplified mode. And this kind of ties into something we've been talking about in the last few episodes of the podcast about how I think games chasing after a kind of hyper-competitive market is probably a bad thing in the long run because, there's a better, broader, less toxic audience to be found by maybe going after something that's more fun rather than hyper-competitive. And Street Fighter is obviously a game that's going to be focused on a hyper-competitive crowd. The fighting game community is a community that is made up of people that will spend hundreds of hours, thousands of hours learning a single character within a fighting game, trying to perfect them. And they have their own kind of language for talking about everything. It's a super, super competitive, high skill gap genre, really. And that's why it's, always been a bit of a niche genre as well. Most fighting games don't sell a huge number of copies. Even the successful ones don't do that well. Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat tend to manage to cope pretty well. And then you've got the kind of B tier of maybe things like Soul Calibur, Tekken, games that, do okay, but not Dead or Alive maybe, but not quite as well. And then you've got the things that are like super niche, like, Guilty Gear and BlazBlue and stuff like that. And so it's really interesting that Street Fighter's come out with this simplified mode where basically you can set it up to that and you can just keep pressing the same button, just button mashing essentially. And the game will do combos and special moves for you when it thinks it's appropriate. It's kind of like it simplifies all of the inputs into like, hey, okay, like if you're happy for the computer to kind of take over a little bit and to do some of the like tricky work, then you can do that. And I think it's a great thing. And looking at a lot of the reviews are like, yeah, it's awesome. And it's not even like, oh yeah, like you can do this in versus, but you can't do this in ranked. You can totally do it in ranked. You can play the ranked play and you can play using the simplified mode if you want. So whereas normally, if you were button mashing, you'd just be throwing out the same punch over and over again or something. Now you'll be doing something that's more akin to like proper combos. If you find an opening, you'll have a chance of doing some real damage. And I just think that's absolutely awesome because obviously there's still going to be that skill gap. There's still going to be people who do everything manually are making conscious decisions about why they're using certain moves and why they're blocking at certain times, why they're cancelling out of dashes and things like that. But people who are doing it with the simplified mode don't get that level of fine control but they still get to be a little bit more competitive. They still get to, like, not be completely ineffective just because they can't swap between what they're doing quickly enough and stuff like that. They can't do combos. And fighting games are more than just about being able to input commands quickly. There's a lot of kind of thinking about movement, thinking about whether you're going for ranged attacks or short range attacks, trying to like get out of bad situations and get your opponent into bad situations. There's a lot of kind of mind games and stuff like that, which isn't really affected by this that much. If anything, it gives the advantage to the people who don't use the simplified mode because they can make those decisions a bit more sort of, I don't know, precisely, I guess. And it just makes me think of, games that for a long while, like Forza and Gran Turismo and F1 22, where like you can have the racing line on if you want. And it's like some people don't want the racing line on because they know for themselves, like, what's the best racing line for the situation they're in, for the car they're in, and stuff like that. The racing line might not be the absolute best thing. Some people don't want traction control on. Some people don't want like an automatic gearbox and stuff like that. They want to do all that stuff manually because it gives them a bit of an advantage to be a bit more precise, but it is harder and it requires learning. But all of those features are in those games because then people who maybe aren't as invested in it, people who haven't spent such a long time with it, can still compete. They can still have fun. It's all about lowering that skill gap that I've talked about with Call of Duty. The idea of making it so more people can compete against each other and still have a good time. And obviously you do get it in Call of Duty a little bit. Aim assist is really the kind of clearest example of it, where you have something where aiming on a controller is harder than using keyboard and mouse. So there's, options, and it is an option. You can turn it off if you want. There's options to help you with it. There's options to make it so the computer does a little bit of the work for you. And that's something, again, that makes it so people on controller can compete against keyboard and mouse, and I think that's a good thing. So yeah, I think that's a really good thing, and I've been happy to see in a lot of the reviews, a lot of people have talked about the simplified mode, being like, yeah, it's awesome, because now you can have a friend over, you can be playing the normal mode, they can be playing the simplified mode, and you can actually have a kind of fair fight. And it's like, it's just nice for me seeing the kind of validation that lowering the skill gap is seen as a good thing. Because I think it is. I think it's a brilliant thing to lower the skill gap in games. And it's not like you're not eliminating it. And I think that's where the internet gets carried away, because the internet likes to deal in binary things. Either this is good or bad, either this is right or wrong, whatever. Whereas real life isn't really like that. And even within gaming, it's not really like that. Like, lowering the skill gap isn't just an objectively good or a bad thing, same as raising it isn't a good or a bad thing. There's nuance, but I would say overall, lowering it to a point where anyone can compete is a good thing. I personally think that's a fantastic thing. Obviously, it's really good on accessibility and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm really happy about that Street Fighter 6 thing. I'm really excited about that. Hopefully I'll get to play some Street Fighter. I'm kind of waiting to see if I get sent a code because, I don't want to spend money if I don't have to. If they don't send me a code, then I might end up just buying it because I just really want to play it. The game looks absolutely fantastic. I'm just seeing someone saying, Revanite saying, Geeky Pastimes, have you seen that Call of Duty games have now become unsafe to play on all platforms due to the latest cheats, as reported by Charlie Intel for YouTuber? No, I've not heard anything about that, and I just had a quick look at Charlie Intel, and there's nothing in the last 13, 14 hours about it, which, I mean, there's some bloody leaks, which is always really annoying. So I don't think it's a big deal. I think you're either exaggerating it or you've misunderstood something. Oh, apparently there's here we go. There's an exploit in Black Ops Cold War on all platforms. This is from yesterday, where a person can gain access to a player's IP, crash their game, or potentially cause other issues. No indication so far of it happening in Modern Warfare 2 or Warzone 2. So this looks like it's just on Black Ops Cold War, which is probably the key thing there, Revanite, that it's not Call of Duty games, it's one game. And, not even like the last game, it's the game before that. So, yeah, maybe stay off Black Ops Cold War for a bit until they fix it. If they fix it, I mean, there's been obviously some problems with games like Titanfall where they could just never fix it. And it never got sorted out, which is a real shame. But yeah, sounds like that's not much of a news story. Maybe has been a bit exaggerated by some YouTubers. Right, more news stories. The next one is Kerbal Space Program 2. This is less of a news story, I suppose, rather than an update from me, because this is a game that I play a lot. I don't tend to play it on stream very much because not many people watch when I play it on stream, so I just play it in kind of my off time. If I'm waiting for something to download, waiting for something to upload, waiting for something to release, stuff like that, I tend to hop on Kerbal Space Program. I probably play it like 2 or 3 times a day. I play it quite a lot. And it's really annoying because Kerbal Space Program 2 is obviously the sequel to Kerbal Space Program 1, but it works a lot less well. It's very, very frustrating trying to play it because there's so many things that you can do in Kerbal Space Program 1 that just work really well. And Kerbal Space Program 2 is full of bugs. Like, they released it in early access, and so you expect it to have some problems. But the bugs are dramatic. Like, yesterday, I was really proud that I managed to get a rover onto the moon. And first of all, I did it with docking ports, and then the docking ports didn't work, so they couldn't disconnect, and I didn't find that out till I got to the bloody moon, which was annoying. And then I managed to sort it out using a different way of doing it, using decouplers, got my rover on the moon, could drive it around, was very happy, although there's still some weird physics oddness where the rover, I could make it, like, pitch up and down rather than driving forwards for a while, which was weird because there's nothing about it that should make it able to pitch up and down. It didn't have any thrusters on it or anything. It was very strange. But then I found I couldn't get back into my spaceship. If you go out of your spaceship, you can't get back into it at the moment, which is a problem when you're trying to get back off the moon and get your Kerbals home. So the Kerbals home. So yeah, it's got plenty of really annoying bugs. And so I went onto the forums, as you do. It's only available on Steam at the moment. So I went onto the Steam forums and was like, okay, what's going on? If other people had this problem, is there like a workaround or a mod or something that fixes it? And I was shocked to see people saying, like, this game is dead. Like, why are you even still working on it? And I was like, God, it can't be that bad. Kerbal Space Program, I know is kind of a niche thing, but it's a successful niche thing. I mean, the first game was super popular, so I can't imagine that, like, this is so dramatically less popular than that it wouldn't be worth working on. And it always has had a really strange kind of situation with Kerbal Space Program where the first one and second one are made by different companies. And I think there are some people who have worked from the first one who now work on the second one, but it's a different company. They're sort of starting from scratch and stuff like that. And yeah, so I had a look on Steam charts to be like, how bad could it be? Because Steam charts is actually good for this because it's only available on Steam. You know, that's really, really good. And the first game, which, you know, it's peak users when it came out, which was a long time ago. You know, back in what, 2013? April 2013 is when it came out. Its peak users was 20,000, so it's never been a huge game. But right now, from a peak of 20,000, it's still got 1,200 people. And it had 9,000 people playing in February. You know, not that long ago, it had 9,000 people. Then you look at Kerbal Space Program 2. Kerbal Space Program 2 has had an all-time peak of 11,000 users, nearly 12, which is like half, a bit over half. But then right now, like a minute ago, there's 100 people playing. So the first game has 1,000 people playing, or 1,200. Then Kerbal Space Program 2 has 100 people playing. That is definitely putting it in the danger zone of, I can imagine the developers looking at that number and being like, why are we still making this? Like, the 24-hour peak for it is 248 players. Like, is that enough people to make it worth carrying on development? Like, are they making enough money from it? Which really worries me, because Kerbal Space Program 2 is meant to have, like, you know, building colonies on other planets, building space stations, multiplayer, all of these amazing features that just aren't there. And it's, while it is early access, and you can be like, oh, well, you know, some people will just be waiting for the bugs to be fixed, waiting for it to be, like, done. Like, are they? Like, is there a way to know that? Like, I feel like they've just released the game too early. A bunch of people have played it and been like, this is trash. Like, this is just not worth it. And they just won't come back. Like, that's how I feel about a lot of early access games. Unless I'm already very invested in the franchise, I will have a go at it. And then I will kind of, like, if it's bad, I will just if I play something that I don't know very well and it's bad, I will just kind of, like, not come back to it. There's so many early access games I've bought and just never return to, because it's kind of like, I've already spent time with it, I didn't enjoy my time with it. How much are they realistically going to fix it? Like, how much are they going to make it better? which, you know, might be a problem with me, but I think a lot of people are like that. So yeah, sad times. I'm a bit sad that Kerbal Space Program 2 is so much less popular than I thought, and it does make me worry about whether or not it's really going to ever get out of this, like whether it's ever going to get out of this thing. They just released it too early. They made it playable too early. I think lots of people, when they were talking about Kerbal Space Program 2 for like years, like there was a long marketing campaign of, look at all these amazing things, look at these amazing videos, look at these cool features we've got. And then when they finally got to the early access release, it was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. They invited a load of creators to come play it and stuff. And then you play it and it's like, this is a lot worse than the first game. Like, a lot worse. It looks a little bit nicer, but other than that, it's a lot worse than the first game. You know, like for a game that's all about making spaceships and like get, you know, realistic orbital mechanics and getting in and out of the atmosphere, it has things missing like temperature. Like on re-entry, you don't need to worry about heat shields or anything because there is no temperature. Aerodynamics don't work properly. Time skipping doesn't work properly. Docking doesn't work properly. It's like all of these things that are fairly fundamental for a space game don't work. And I understand they're super complicated things, but in the sort of years building up to the early access release, they kind of gave the implication that the game was already better than Kerbal Space Program, and the things they were going to add in the sort of early access period were just going to be the new things, and that's just not the case at all. Like now they're struggling to get back. There's also no campaign. Like there's only sandbox. There's nothing to do with, you don't earn science and do experiments or anything like that. All of this stuff that came very early on to the first game just isn't there. So that's really sad. Like that kind of bothered me a little bit. It's a little bit of a shame. So the next news story, because we've got a few quite hefty ones today. This is something that might be controversial, and I'd particularly be interested to hear any Americans' take on this. I know it's very early for Americans, or late, depending on your perspective. But this is a controversial one. 6 Days in Fallujah has got a release date. It's got coming out in early access in the 22nd of June, which is, you know, a bit less. It's June now, so it's a bit less than a month. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks. And this is a kind of interesting story behind this game, because the game was originally announced, as in it was talked about that it was being made 18 years ago. Like, I can't think of many games that have been through a sort of development hell longer than that. Like, 18 years is insane. It's based on the Battle for Fallujah, which was like one of the bloodiest battles in the Iraq War. You know, it was when America invaded Iraq, and they were going in Fallujah, in the city of Fallujah. They were going door to door, trying to sort of like weed out any defense, I guess. And they, you know, they were going through civilians' homes. They were fighting through through residential areas. Like that's kind of what it comes down to. There was, you know, the initial push of like tanks and jets and all that sort of stuff. You know, the shock and awe. And then there was like the ground battle of, okay, now they're having to go building by building, clearing it. And those buildings were homes. Like those buildings were people's houses. When the game started being made, it was like very shortly after this had happened. You know, like months after the actual battle had happened, someone came out and said, we're going to make a video game about this. And it was originally going to be published by Konami, and Konami dropped it. Konami were like, yeah, we're not, like when they saw what they were doing, it was like, yeah, we're not going to be a part of this. And they backed away from it and dropped it. And then it sort of came back and they said that it was going to release in 2021. And then they came out and said, oh yeah, it's going to miss that. It's got pushed back to 2022. And now it's coming out into early access into 2023. And yeah, it claims to be an authentic recreation of the bloodiest battle in the Iraq War. But it's like all of their talking about how they're making this authentic is like, we've interviewed like nearly 100 or over 100 soldiers who were involved in the Battle of Fallujah. But as far as I can tell from their websites and from what they've said in interviews and stuff, I was researching this for a fair while yesterday. They interviewed exclusively American soldiers, as far as I can tell. I might be wrong on that, but that's definitely the gist I got, is that they interviewed lots and lots of American soldiers, despite the fact that they've confirmed that the game is going to involve, obviously, you know, Iraqi soldiers, but also it's going to involve a lot of civilians. Like there are going to be civilians there. And I didn't see any mention in any of their materials about whether they've interviewed any of those people, any of the people who, you know, dare say, might have been somewhat more affected by this than anyone else because it was a time where they had soldiers coming into their homes. Um, and I've spoken about it before on a podcast. I don't think it's any secret that I'm fairly like anti-military, anti-war kind of. I'm not a fan of any of that kind of stuff. I've always found it a bit unsettling when Call of Duty starts getting close to like the real military and kind of glamorizing some of the stuff that the military has done or is doing. I always preferred Call of Duty when it was a bit more fantasy. That's why part of the reason why I love Advanced Warfare and Infinite Warfare is it's so kind of out there. And Call of Duty Zombies and stuff, and Warzone. It's also like unrealistic. It's also going so far into making it silly that it's easier to detach from real life. But when they did stuff, like in Modern Warfare 2019, and they had like the highway of death, and they were like, "Oh yeah, the Russians did this, isn't it terrible?" And it's like that was kind of a real, pretty much a war crime that the American army did. And then going through, like in Modern Warfare 2019, the gunfight on the streets of London with the Piccadilly level, or the sort of like attacking a house in Camden and going through and just shooting a bunch of people in a house in Camden. And then with the the new Modern Warfare, with Modern Warfare 2, that whole thing where I've talked about before, they go to Amsterdam and get in a gunfight and shoot a load of people. They go to Spain and snipe a load of people who are just like paid guards. They go to Mexico and destroy a village with an AC-130. And I've always found that really uncomfortable, this kind of presenting this in a way where they're like, hey, isn't this awesome that the military can do this? And it's like, no, not really. Like, this isn't an awesome thing. This is kind of a tragedy. I'm not a fan of that. I don't like it at all. And I found like this on the Wikipedia page where it talks about the Battle of Fallujah. This is just a quote for it, which really kind of encapsulates some of the problems with making a game out of this 6 Days of Fallujah thing. The Fallujah killings of April 2003 began when United States Army soldiers from the American 1st Battalion, 325th Infantry Regiment of the 82nd Airport Division, fired into a crowd of Iraqi civilians who were protesting their presence at a school within the city of Fallujah, killing 17 protesters. Like, that's the sort of thing that happened there. That American soldiers fired into a crowd of protesters at a school and killed 17 of them. People who were protesting saying like, hey, we don't really want the American military in our city. I think making a video game about that, where you're doing it from the perspective of the Americans, and it seems to be, again, from the marketing materials, from the interviews, from the trailers, it seems very like, hoorah, what an amazing job the US military did. This seems like, a problem. And when they've shown off bits of gameplay and stuff, and they've talked about the going house to house, it's very much like, oh yeah, it looks like, you can like kick down a door and then point a gun at the civilians' faces and then get them to get on the floor and then tie them up and stuff like that. Sometimes you might accidentally shoot one when because you don't know whether they're an enemy or not. And it's like, video gamifying that is like unsettling to me. There's a way to do it, I think. Like, there's definitely a possibility to do that in a more interesting way of, showing the more harrowing side of it, and maybe showing how, in a lot of ways, maybe the US military could be seen as the bad guys there, and there's at least some ambiguity there, if not like they're outright the villains. It's a really difficult thing. And I think it's like, it's almost more interesting that they're releasing it now when everything's happening in Ukraine, where it's like very easy for people to look at what's happening in Ukraine and be like, Russia are the bad guys. Look at what Russia's doing. They're targeting civilian populations. They're destroying big parts of cities. They're moving through people's houses and just like taking their food, taking their stuff, taking their cars and stuff, killing civilians and saying that they were enemy combatants and stuff like that. It's very easy to look at that and be like, well, Russia are clearly the bad guys here. Like, this is very clearly a bad thing that they're doing. But then, like, you're presenting it being like, hey, remember when America invaded Iraq? I mean, not just America, NATO, England was there too. British troops were there too. But it's like, remember when that happened? And, like, the NATO troops, the Allied troops, were going into people's homes and destroying towns and destroying infrastructure and killing civilians. And, like, You see where I'm going with this. Like, there's a weird kind of thing of like doing that, but playing the game as the side that were the aggressors and the side that were, um, victimizing a civilian population seems wrong to me. And like, right now, if someone released a video game right now where you were playing through the Ukraine conflict as the Russians and it was like presenting them as if they were doing something well, they were doing something right, they were the heroes of the game. I think most people would find that super unsettling. Like most people would find that deeply troubling. So yeah, like this is again, it's a difficult issue because it's like, oh, there's a bunch of war games, Call of Duty's shown like war atrocities and stuff like that in the past. And it's like, it has. And I think, I think it'd be better if it hadn't, because Call of Duty's never managed to do it sensitively. I still find it really troubling when I see people, even the official Call of Duty accounts, actually, no, I don't know if they've ever done it. In my head, I'm thinking they have, but I don't know. Maybe they haven't. Glamorizing that no Russian mission from Modern Warfare 2, no people being like, oh, I hope we get to do that again. And it's like, I don't think Call of Duty handled that very sensitively because people are looking back at it and being like, wasn't that fun? Like, if that's someone's response to it, then you messed up, isn't it? Like, if someone played through No Russian and was like, that was awesome, then you've done it wrong. Like, you've presented that incorrectly. And I think that's just a terrible, terrible idea. So yeah, like this whole thing, like this whole 6 Days in Fallujah game existing isn't necessarily a problem, but presenting it as like the American soldiers that you play as are the heroes, and what they're doing was, impressive and glorious. I don't think that's right. I think, it's something that people should be ashamed of. Like, I think, the whole Iraq war is basically something that people should be ashamed of. I feel like in England, there's definitely much more of that sentiment. Whenever you hear about people talking about the British Army and they're talking, about, doing that whole like, oh, help our heroes kind of thing, it's always about Afghanistan because, there was this kind of clearer thing of like, oh, in Afghanistan, they were fighting the Taliban who were, oppressed women and children and stuff like that, and Al Qaeda and that sort of thing. That's easier to kind of stomach because, we've brought up with this idea of like they were bad people. Look at these bad things the Taliban are still doing today. That's easier to stomach rather than when you think about the Iraq war and it's like, oh yeah, we invaded a country, like just a sovereign country, because we said that they had weapons of mass destruction and were ready to use them. And then it turned out that whole thing not just was a mistake, but was a lie. Like that's like something that I think British people now, for the most part, look back on with shame. That like that was a bad thing that we did. Like that was a terrible thing that the government did. That was a terrible thing. Tony Blair, who was prime minister at the time, a lot of people now see him as basically a war criminal. It's a shameful thing on our past, and this game seems to be glamorizing that. Anyway, I don't want to talk about it too much more because it's just a very uncomfortable thing. And obviously, it's something like I'm not in the military. I'm not making these decisions. I don't know any Iraqi people. There's loads of stuff that I don't know about. I can't talk about this as an expert. I just wanted to talk about why it's troubling, because I think there's a lot of people, I've seen a lot of things where it's like, oh yeah, this game's coming out. It looks like a great tactical shooter. And I think a lot of people don't get why there's the controversy about it or why there's the sort of ill feeling towards it. And I think that's basically it, is that like in that whole combat situation, the civilians definitely were the victims in that situation, and the American troops did some horrible things. And playing as those American troops, glorifying what those American troops did, seems insulting and abhorrent to me. I'm going to go through some of the comments in chat. Obviously, I won't say anything that seems terrible. Afas said, I'm stunned this is getting made. The invasion of Iraq is viewed as an even worse light when it was than when the game was originally announced. Yep, 100%. Johnny said, hi Johnny, by the way. It was refreshing going to the War Remnants Museum in Vietnam and seeing a take on history that wasn't American-centric. Yeah, I mean, like, that's a really interesting thing, is like, whenever you do go to war museums abroad, one thing that's always surprised me, even just the ones in Europe, you go to like, places, the museums focused around World War I and II. a lot of in Europe, a lot of the perspective on World War II is this was a horrific tragedy. Like this was a terrible thing that happened for everyone, including for Germany. Like World War One and Two was a terrible thing for most people in Germany. And for people in Russia and people in people in India and Canada got roped into it and stuff. And you go to like the graves for the German soldiers and even like the French soldiers and the Belgian soldiers and the Dutch soldiers, and the graveyards are very solemn places where it's like this is an awful thing that happened and should never be allowed to happen again. And then you go to like the British and the American graveyards, and it's very much like, hoorah, these are our heroes. These people are amazing. They did amazing things. And it's like, this is like, to me, that's the wrong message to take away from the war. Not like, look at this like heroism that was shown in the war, which undoubtedly there were people doing heroic things. I'm not saying that, but like for that to be the takeaway from the war seems terrible. Like the sort of like the big German mass graves with a big black piece of marble saying like this is an awful thing that happened seems more fitting to me for like how that should be remembered. CS6 said, like making a game the British Army being in Northern Ireland during the 80s. Yeah, 100%. Or the British Army being in the Republic of Ireland in the 1800s. Joe W, in the past, some games did history and not in a bad way. Yeah, I mean, there have been games that have tried to take on history and tried to do it in an interesting way. I would say not many, though. I struggle to think. People always point out Spec Ops The Line, but Spec Ops The Line is worth pointing, is about a fictional future war. Like, it's not taking on real history at all. It's taking on the themes of war. But even then, it's really just a retelling of Heart of Darkness, and it's kind of, the Joseph Conrad book, and it's not talking about history as much as it is talking about, like, violent video games. I can't think of many games that have done history in a very sensitive way. Maybe they exist, I just can't think of any off the top of my head that have done history and, looked at war in a kind of, the violence here is awful. I would really like that. I think games having violence is awful as their central message would be a good and refreshing thing. I think, I've talked about it before, Heavy Rain dabbled with that a little bit. There's a couple of scenes where it was like, hey, maybe the police shouldn't shoot people when they feel threatened. And, I think, like, I strongly think, like, there should be more games like that, look at things like American policing and stuff like that. Like, should all the police have guns? I've been saying for ages that with Grand Theft Auto, I would love it if one of the characters, and if they did a thing like GTA 5 where it had like 3 characters, if one of them was a police officer and it kind of really looked at the kind of, negative sides of the police, I think that would be interesting. House says, I talked to an Iraqi guy about learning to fly the AH-64 in DCS, and it turned out he was on the highway of death. Made you super uncomfortable. Sometimes forget there are real people involved. Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing. I think I sort of came across this quite a lot when I was teaching. That when you talk to kids about Iraq and even Afghanistan, really, a lot of kids think that those countries are just deserts with huts in them. Like that, genuinely, I think media and gaming hasn't helped with this. When people think of Iraq and Afghanistan, they think of like, some like, in Modern Warfare 2 in the new Call of Duty, like Tarak Village. They think of that, of just being like there being some ruins, of there being, people having to live outside, it just being a vast desert and there not being anything there. And they don't think about the fact that, Iraq's just like to be honest, a pretty westernized like country with like places like Baghdad are just, are cities in very much the same vein as like Barcelona or, like Athens or Rome and stuff like that. They had places, like they have schools, they have supermarkets, they have flats, they have libraries, they have, people just looking for entertainment. Like they have, restaurants and stuff like that. It's just a normal place where people live. And it's weird looking at, what's happening in Kiev and like in Ukraine. And people, I think, are more shocked by what's happening there because the city looks a bit more like what they recognize. And so it's like, oh my God, we're seeing like these Russian missiles hitting schools and, orphanages and hospitals and apartment buildings and stuff. And it's like, what do you think we were watching when we were watching the invasion of Iraq? or like the invasion of Kabul, or like that. It's the same thing. It's the same. They were just people living there. It's not like everybody who lived in Iraq was like one of Saddam Hussein's henchmen, or not like everybody who was living in Afghanistan was part of Al Qaeda. This video is so going to get demonetized, isn't it? But yeah, it's like, it's not even like all desert. It's like there are deserts there, but there's also, I'm always surprised, when you look at pictures of Afghanistan. I used to do this with, we used to do some war poetry as part of what I used to teach. And it's like, you just go to the kids and it's like, hey, like if you look at Afghanistan and like maybe search for like Afghanistan forest, and then you start seeing pictures. Like this is a good one. I think I've used this one before actually. Let's just open image in new tab. There we go. Like, there we go. I'll put it on the screen. Sorry for people that can't see it. That's Afghanistan. And it's like, for people who are listening to this, it's a lush forest with a river running through and some snow-capped mountains in the distance. Like, Afghanistan is not just a desert, and Iraq is not just a desert. It's like, it's a place where people lived. Well, people live still, and it's like, that's the other side of it, is like, there's still people now, like 20 years ongoing, who are suffering from all of the infrastructure that was destroyed, from the family members that were killed, from the, like the number of young men that were wiped out. It's like, there's still, a very lasting effect of this thing. And so to make a game kind of making light of it and being like, yeah, we need to get the mission done. The mission's the most important thing. Is like, this is unpleasant. It's unpleasant. Sorry, just carrying on reading some of the comments. Using gaming to glorify actual events is propaganda madness. Yeah, like glorification of war is just always a bad thing, as far as I'm concerned. Just always a bad thing. Flippikitten said, did you see that ministers want an investigation into gaming and mental health? Oh, that's something unrelated. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But it's nonsense. It's like, I saw one of the reports where they're talking about like, there's been precious little studies on the negative effects of gaming on mental health. And then people were like, maybe that's because there isn't much evidence of negative effects of gaming on mental health. I'm sure there's lots of correlation. People who are antisocial, people who struggle with, going outside and stuff and talking to people probably end up playing a lot more games. That doesn't mean video games caused it, does it? NinjaCat, thank you so much for the £10 super chat. That's the first time we've had a super chat, I think, in one of these podcasts. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Thank you, Cat. House said, because he'd spent time in Iraq, he had lots of opinions. Saddam was evil and had to go, but we made a huge mess and did everything wrong we could. Saddam Hussein was undoubtedly an evil man. Whether or not it was other countries' place to invade the country and occupy it in order to depose a leader, I think that's a little bit more up for debate. There's plenty of other evil leaders of countries that we haven't invaded. Look at people like Mugabe, like Kim Jong-un. Like, there's definitely been other times where there are other evil people running countries in the world that we haven't invaded. Imagine if someone was like, when Trump was in charge, imagine if some other country, if China was like, this Trump guy seems evil. He's very clearly lying. He's very clearly doing stuff, behind the scenes. He's doing things that are clearly immoral. We're going to invade America to get rid of him for you. You'd be a bit like, that doesn't seem right. I don't think a country having an evil leader is necessarily cause for, thing. People supporting civil wars and insurrection, stuff like that, is a different thing. That's a different thing that you can argue maybe makes sense. Like countries supporting Ukraine not being invaded by Russia makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's many people who are saying, yeah, America should just invade Russia or invade Ukraine and get rid of all of the Russians from there. It's like invading a country is a very big deal and obviously causes a huge amount of collateral damage, or killing civilians, murdering civilians. Let's call it what it is, shall we? Have I ever been to Auschwitz? No, I have not. I've only been to Poland once, very recently, but I only went to a theme park. We were only there for like a day. The EU was born from the idea that nothing like World War I and World War II should ever happen again. Yep, and now Britain has left the EU because we're idiots. Robert Very says, a well-known YouTuber called Bright Insight, Jimmy Cossetti, was in Fallujah. His opinion was it was a waste, but worst of all, leaving a broken country to gangsters who are destroying world heritage. Yeah, I mean, you look at stuff like ISIS and stuff, and it's like, well, this is clearly... It's like Russia tried to invade Afghanistan. That led to the Taliban taking over. We invaded Iraq. Now, then you ended up with like ISIS trying to take over. It's like, yes, destroying a country and then leaving turns out to be a bad thing. I mean, destroying the country in the first place, bad thing. Then leaving before you've repaired the damage you've caused, also a bad thing. But that's colonialism, isn't it? Joe Dobie says, because Ukraine's in Europe, that's why they're shocked. But 20 years ago, there was a war in the Balkans. I mean, there's been plenty of wars in Europe. But yeah, my point was more just like what's happening to Ukraine from Russia. Russia, a big superpower, invading a smaller country, saying that they're trying to change the regime because they say that the leaders are evil and, this is actually for the good of everyone, for everyone's security, is basically the same thing as what happened with America and Iraq. Like, it's just America was in the role that Russia is in now, and Iraq was in the situation that Ukraine's in now. Obviously, there's differences. Zelensky is not Saddam Hussein. But still, the idea of false pretenses, Russia saying that Ukraine is full of Nazis and America saying that Iraq was full of weapons of mass destruction is very, very, very similar. And it's like, it was a very bad thing that America, what I'm saying, I don't want to give the impression that I'm saying that what Russia did is a good thing. I'm saying what America did was a bad thing, like a very bad thing. And NATO, I keep saying America, I don't really mean that. It's like, it was NATO. Tony Blair was as much a part of it. Bloody idiot. Anyway, let's move on from this because, as Hal says, this is getting very, very heavy. I just get very riled up about this stuff. Don't forget to like the podcast if you do like it. If you dislike it, you can dislike it. I don't mind. So, moving on. Riot, who make League of Legends. I don't really talk about Riot very much because I don't play League of Legends. But there's been a really interesting story happening, and this has been going on for a while now. It's just kind of, I was reading about it yesterday, really. That they've delayed and threatened to cancel the League of Legends North American esports season. So this is a weird, complicated situation. I don't fully understand, but I think what's happening is there is a championship series in League of Legends called the LCS. It runs a bit like CDL, where there are a number of teams, and each team has to pay $10 million for a place. Because, and then that $10 million is used to fund, all of the events and pay all of the people involved. And it's how Riot make money from it. And the idea is that then they make their money from streaming and from merch and from prizes and stuff like that. It's a lot of money's involved in this. I think I think CDL is a similar thing where teams have to pay a lot of money to be one of the teams. And there is a huge amount of money changing hands for stuff like this. So big money, this important business. This isn't just, a funsies thing. So yeah, the LCS teams, and Riot had a mandate from not that long ago, like a year ago or two, that all of the LCS teams also have to organize a North American League team. Basically, it's like an amateur league. So the idea is that you have the big championship league, and then you have some smaller regional leagues, where, the idea is that then players have more of a chance of getting involved and then getting into the pro circuit. Kind of like how Formula 1 has Formula 2 and 3. It has these smaller championships. That's still a big deal, still very high level. But then the idea is that, it almost feeds people into Formula 1. This was the idea that Riot was saying, hey, if you're part of LCS, part of what you have to do is you also have to fund an amateur team. Because those amateur teams, it's a lot harder for someone getting started out in esports to be able to not work, to be able to do it full time. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. But by making the teams fund this, they were making it so there were more paid positions within esports, and that meant more people could, have the training, have the time working together, making content, sort of a win-win for everyone, except for these teams. Now, supposedly, these teams said to Riot, we don't want to do this anymore. It's too expensive. We can't afford to keep doing this. And so Riot said, okay, you don't have to. Riot were like, okay, you don't have to. And that meant immediately that the North American leagues were a bunch of the teams, not all of them, but a bunch of teams, yeah, we're not going to fund the team anymore. So all of those players on those teams, all of those coaches were going to get let go. We're going to get fired, essentially. Made redundant, I guess. And so in North America, all of the players and coaches decided to group together and kind of make a, like a union, essentially, and say, if you do this, if you remove this mandate for them to fund it, then none of us are going to play. Like, none of us are going to play in any of the championships, including LCS, which is the big championship. And like now Riot are saying, well, if we don't have many North American players playing, then we're just not going to have any North American teams in the LCS. Like, we're just going to get rid of the North American side of it, which, is quite a big deal to just sort of like wipe out a continent from your world championship kind of thing. And I've got no idea how big of a deal that is in terms of our North America win. I don't know if it's like StarCraft, where basically all of the winners are European or Korean. I've got no idea. But it just seemed like a big kind of interesting thing. This is big business. This is, incredible amounts of money. And one of the nice things is that it is people who are players who are definitely getting a salary. People who are on those teams that aren't being get rid of. They are still willing to give up their money, give up their position, which, they've worked all their life for, to support other people in the same industry. I think that's a really nice thing. That's a really sort of impressive thing. And it'll be interesting to see what Riot's doing. I can kind of see, but I don't think there's someone being super evil here. I think it is just a money thing. It's like with all esports, it's always been like, where's the money coming from? With for sports like football and Formula One and, boxing and stuff, you've always got the spectators paying a huge amount of money. Tickets to go see a Premiership game of football are incredibly expensive. I imagine tickets to go see an NFL game are hugely expensive. I was watching a video yesterday of someone going to Bahrain to find out, the cheapest way you could go see a Formula One race. And the cheapest tickets there were $275, which is like a lot of money. I know it's for a weekend, but that's a lot of money. And I think like with esports, they just don't have that. Not many people are willing to spend hundreds of dollars to watch a video game. Like, that's just not likely. There'll be very few people who are willing to do that. You wouldn't be able to find tens of thousands of people to do it to fill a stadium or whatever. At various times in esports, that's kind of happened with StarCraft at its peak and stuff. But generally, that's not happening. And even then, I'm sure the tickets weren't $200. But yeah, so it's just kind of an interesting situation. I just like the fact that there were players who are on a lot of money for playing League of Legends, willing to stand up for people who were, sort of at that semi-professional level. I thought that was nice. Anyway, we've got a couple more news stories to go. Netflix gaming. There's a bit more news about their big game. So Netflix, for anyone who doesn't know, announced that they'd formed a new gaming development studio being headed up by Joseph Staten, who used to be the director of Halo, like back in the days of the good Halos. He was working on an unannounced AAA game, which was going to be multi-platform, apparently, not just a Netflix thing. And now the art director from Sony Santa Monica, the person who worked on God of War and God of War Ragnarok, he's now gone to join them. So this is like a pretty big deal, having Joseph Staten and the art director from God of War working in your team. That's a pretty big deal. Again, I've said a million times, I don't think you should put too much stock in these things where it's like, this amazing developer who worked on another game is now working on this, because games are obviously massive joint efforts with dozens of people, hundreds of people sometimes working on them. But it does at least show that Netflix are serious about this. I mean, it's difficult because we've just had like Google Stadia with like Amy Hennig, like them shutting down, even though they had her working for them. And, the Amazon games that get cancelled all the time. There's like lots and lots of studios that have got big names for them and then they don't end up making anything. But maybe this one will be different. And Netflix obviously, have this huge audience already. It's kind of will be interesting to see if they can translate into something like meaningful within gaming. It'll be interesting to watch anyway. I'm kind of curious to see what they come up with. I think by the sound of it, they're still hiring, so I don't think we'll see that game for like 3 or 4 years anyway. So probably something to put on a back burner. Then we have some Call of Duty news. Before I talk about the other Call of Duty news I wanted to talk about, I did see earlier, I do keep an eye on chat, I just don't always want to talk about stuff out of turn. Someone was talking about, did I talk about the Tim the Tatman and Nick Mercs skins? Was there, El Diablo said, was there a discussion on Nick Mercs and Tim being brought into COD yesterday? No, I don't really have any thoughts on it. I think it's super awesome for them. Like, that's amazing. It's like being made into an operator in Call of Duty would be so cool. I would absolutely love it. And, I think it's good that they do stuff like that. It's obviously something that Fortnite's done for a while. Like, they've got a load of content creators in the game with their own skins, and then their fans can use their skins if they want. That's really cool. I don't really have anything else to say on that. I just think it's a good thing. I genuinely think with the cosmetics and stuff like that, I'm much more interested in them doing things like that rather than them doing another, oh, it's an edgy guy in a black hoodie. Like, I don't care. Or like all of the sort of authentic military skins. I honestly don't care about that. I mean, a lot of you know I play in like normally in Warzone lately. I play in a giant rabbit suit because I think it's funny. I'm way more up for the crazy skins. There's one of the things I love the most about Fortnite is the fact that I can go on Fortnite and I can play as Darth Vader or Indiana Jones or a Xenomorph from Alien. I love that stuff. I think it's great. And I would love it if Warzone had more of that. I know there's some people who play Warzone and want it all to be like, proper military skins. But like Battlefield does that, and I don't see people buying loads of Battlefield skins. Like I never hear people talking about Battlefield skins because it's all just, like, oh, this one's got slightly blue camo. Oh, this one's got a radio on his shoulder. It's like, oh, who cares? I like the crazy skins. I like the silly ones. Bring back Dread. Yeah, the Judge Dredd skin's really cool. Warzone 1 had loads of good ones. I loved the Mecha Godzilla skin. I thought that was super cool. I liked the horror ones they did, like Billy from Saw. I thought that was really cool. Donnie Darko was really cool. I just love the license stuff. I want more of that. More silly license stuff. I think it's a lot of fun. I could sit here all day and think of all of the different people that I would love to have in Warzone. Shaun of the Dead, I was thinking the other day, would be a good one. I'd love to play as the entire cast of Shaun of the Dead. Like, playing, whether you're playing as Shaun or Liz or Ed, or even like Bill Nye, zombie Bill Nye would be awesome. I think, getting some of these licenses would probably be quite tricky. John McClane was really cool as well from Die Hard. That was another good one that kind of fit well. I know people are always like, oh, I want to be able to play as John Wick. And it's like, it's just a guy in a suit. I don't know why. I don't find like the look of John Wick particularly iconic. I spent all of John Wick 4. I went to go see John Wick 4 in the cinema by myself and had a thoroughly miserable time. And through a lot of it, I was just thinking, Keanu Reeves looks quite ridiculous in this. Like, pretty ridiculous, for the things he's doing and the way he's acting and stuff like that. The whole, I find John Wick deeply silly. But bring back Krampus. Yes, 100%. I did like the bald white guy skin, and now it's another. The guy who I used to play as, the bald guy, wasn't actually white. He was Middle Eastern, Azure. But, you couldn't tell enough for it to not look like me, which was nice. But yeah, I don't think I could play as the Tim the Tatman skin, really. I'm a very, very different build to Tim the Tatman. I'm like 6'3", I'm very tall. It's not, I don't think it quite fit. John Wick licensing would be crazy expensive. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it probably would be worth it to them because I'm sure loads of people would buy it. I just personally wouldn't care. But my personal feelings don't matter. Right. The Call of Duty news I did want to talk about, the DMZ stuff. I'm going to make a video about this after I do this. So I will talk about this in great length in the video. But DMZ is having another wipe. That's kind of the big headline, is that DMZ are wiping all of your progress again. They have done it before, and they are doing it again. Just getting rid of Charlie Intel out of my Twitter searches, so I don't want them to bloody show up again. I was really annoyed. So whoever was talking about like that, like the Black Ops bad things happening, it meant I had to go look at Charlie Intel, and then Charlie Intel was just full of like leaks about future seasons. And it's like, I don't want to read that. I don't want to find out stuff about Call of Duty from a bloody Twitter account. Not interested. Anyway, Call of Duty. I'm going to read out what their actual tweet said. So Infinity Ward tweeted it, saying, there are many exciting additions coming to DMZ in Season 4. Updates will include a refresh and reset like that of Season 2 in order to make room for new mission sets and the new upgrade redacted. That's the first thing. So there's going to be a refresh and reset like in Season 2. At least we know what to expect now. So all of your mission progress will get reset. All of your insured weapon slots will get reset. I assume your active operator duty, whatever they're called, your character slots, they'll be reset. Your key stash will be gone. Your contraband stash will be gone. Your mission item stash will be gone. Any cosmetics that you have unlocked will be kept. They won't go anywhere. But the current awards, some of them might go, some of them might stay. Some of the old missions will go, some of them will stay. Last time they did this, it was a pretty positive thing, to be honest. Like, it was a pretty positive thing overall because a lot of the old missions were terrible and they made them mostly better. Like there's still some missions that were bad, but they were better. And I assume if they're doing it again, we're going to get another pass of that, of like maybe some of the bad missions now will be gone and made better. Maybe some of the ones that have always been a bit broken will be gone and made better. We'll see. You know, and some of them, like the harder ones, they get sorted around. So the easier ones get put earlier on, the harder ones get put later on. It's just kind of reorganizing the whole thing. It does bother me a little bit that I think from my perspective, it's like, oh, they're wiping it again. I've gone through all of the missions twice now. I don't know if I can really be bothered to do it again. At least, you know, not. I'll play it, but I'm not going to be like that fussed about whether I get it all of the missions done. Because it's not like you ever got a reward for completing all the story missions at season 5, you know, tier 5. You don't get anything for like being a completionist about it. And the idea that like, oh well, if you do it again, it's just going to get wiped in a few months, so who cares? And I think a lot of people probably feel like that and probably won't even play it again. They'll just be like, oh, I was, you know, halfway through tier 3 and now I'm back to tier 1 again. People who don't play it that much will just be, I would completely understand just being completely put off. You know, imagine if you were playing a long RPG or an MMO or something, and then every 4 months, like you only had time to play it a little bit every week, and then every 4 months they just put you back to the beginning again. Like you just give up. Like you just wouldn't bother. And I can see that like there are some positives in terms of it will be a better experience for new players because everyone will be at the same point and they won't be behind anymore. But I don't know how much that matters. Like it doesn't really matter in DMZ whether someone else is on a further mission than you. Like that doesn't really affect you very much. It's not like an MMO where other people are more powerful than you, or like when they do wipes on something like Tarkov because, you know, people who have been playing longer have much better weapon stuff than you, but at a wipe everyone's equal. Or an MMO where other people, you know, are higher level than you and are doing content you can't do yet, but then everyone gets put back to the same place like World of Warcraft Classic, and then everyone gets to play at the same time. It's not like that because in DMZ I can play with someone right now who's never played DMZ before, and it's fine. It doesn't really make any difference. So yeah, it just seems I don't think it's gonna attract that many new people, but I think it will put a lot of the old people off. And I genuinely don't think many people are playing DMZ. I think DMZ has a tiny, tiny, tiny community that care about it a lot, but I don't think there's many people in it. And, you know, I think it's, you know, in order of thousands of people play it. I'm not saying like 10 people play it, but I think it's thousands of people. And I think this will put a lot of them off, especially the people who only dabble in the mode, the people who only play it occasionally. I think a lot of them will be like, what's the point? I'm just not going to bother anymore. So, but I can understand why they need to do it because, you know, the missions are bad. A lot of the missions are bad. The rewards are bad. The progression isn't that interesting. Like going through the missions right now in DMZ isn't very interesting. So they do need to keep on making that better. And this is the way they're doing it. So fair enough. It also, when it says, and a new upgrade something, I joked on Twitter saying like, oh, I wonder if they mean the new upgrade bundles. But jokes aside, I don't really know what word could go there. The new upgrade path, the new upgrade rewards. I imagine it's probably that. I imagine what it probably is when you complete some missions now, you will get rewards that are very much like the ones they were selling in bundles. So you'll be like, hey, finish the tier 5 story mission of Legion, and now you get a medium backpack every time you start a game. That's my guess, is that it's something like that. But I don't know. And then faction mission progress will be reset in lieu of the new ability to earn faction something. We know what this is because people have bloody leaked it all over the place. But I'm not going to spoil it here for people who don't know what it is. I'm not massively excited about it, to be honest. I'm not thrilled. But we'll see. And then it says contraband key and mission inventories will be emptied, which we knew. Insured weapon slots will be reset as we introduced new ways to unlock them. That's a red flag. New ways to unlock insured weapon slots. Before it was getting to certain like milestones in mission progress. If it's not that anymore, is it going to be bundles? Are you going to have like, oh, you've got 3 insured weapon slots. You can unlock 1 extra by completing tier 3 of all the factions, and then you unlock the 3rd one by buying a 20 quid bundle. I wouldn't be surprised. And that would suck. That would be really bad. And then it says earned rewards such as blueprint skins, corn cards won't be affected. Stay tuned for all the intel on season 4 of DMZ in an upcoming blog post. I've got no idea when that blog post is. Normally when I say upcoming, they mean next week. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was sometime next week. We find out a little bit more. But yeah, it kind of, I just think all of this sounds a bit like they're saying, hey, we're going to rejig things and reset it. So we're going to delete all your progress, but now you're going to be able to buy some of the things that you were getting for free before. Like, that's kind of like me. Maybe it's me being cynical, but I'm cynical because they put all those stupid pay to win bundles in. But that's kind of my gut reaction to this. I'm not reading that being like, oh, I'm super excited to see what this is. You know, it'll be fine that they're doing the mission reset. If there's some new missions, that'll be good. I would say last time they did a mission reset, for the first couple of tiers, it was quite fun because it meant that they were adding missions to the new maps. You know, before we didn't have any missions for Building 21. People, I think it's easy to forget that Building 21 didn't have any missions attached to it at all originally. And then they added them, and obviously they added them for Ashika Island, and then obviously we've got some for Koshai Complex with Redacted as well. So maybe this means we're getting a new map as well, because, you know, like, that's why they said before in a creator call before, they said they had to do the refresh because they added Ashika Island. I wonder if this is a sign that we're getting a new map, maybe. And maybe, you know, getting some new missions, it means that there'll be less filler. They'll get rid of some of the bad missions and replace them with better missions. That's good. But last time they did this, once you got past the first couple of tiers, a lot of the later missions felt like they were the same. A lot of the missions were the same mission, and that was kind of fine because they're good missions. But I've already done them twice now, at least. You know, sometimes I've done them multiple times. You know, if like we had to do them again for Scotto, or we had to do them again because something bugged or something. There's a bunch of missions like Caved In and stuff that I've done so many times now. Going back into the game being like, oh cool, I get to do this exact same thing again, will be super tedious. So hopefully they've changed some things up. Hopefully they've modified some stuff. You know, I'm not going to look forward to being like, oh, cool, I get to get 12 dog tags in building, or 9 dog tags or whatever it was in Building 21 again. I don't really want to do that again. That wasn't massively fun the last time. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not massively excited about this news, to be honest. I'm a little bit annoyed. It's a little bit sad. So just reading a couple of people in chat. The subreddit is up in arms about the weapon slot reset. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Subreddits are always up in arms about something. That's why they exist, isn't it? They're not fans of things. I was listening to a podcast the other day where they were talking about how hardcore fans of anything hate it. Like, whatever you're talking about, if if you look at what the hardcore fans think about it, they hate it. Any video game, any band, any kind of like film series, you know, hardcore Star Wars fans. There's always been that joke, you know, no one hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans. Star Trek fans, people are just like, if you're really into something like to an obsessive degree, you probably hate the thing. Like, it's so weird. It's like me and Johnny, actually. Johnny's in chat. I don't know if he's still listening. But me and Johnny used to live with someone who was, like, I don't know if they were in charge, but they seemed to be a big deal within the 30 Seconds to Mars fan club, Jared Leto's band. And they would always go on about all these, like, just bloody, like, girls who had terrible music taste were going on about how much they hated Jared Leto. It's like, okay, these weird obsessive fans who were like drawing things on themselves to do with it are they're just constantly moaning about Jared Leto, and it just, I thought that was funny. And it's just always been the way, you know, Call of Duty fans, the really obsessive ones, hate Call of Duty. The people who are happy are the people who just engage with something normally. I think, like, I would be, as if I was creating one of these things, I would, you know, if I was creating a game series or I was creating a film series or something like that, I'd bloody hate the obsessive fans. They just seem like the absolute worst. There's a good bit I talked about before in that movie, The Restaurant. No, The Menu. That was it. The Menu was like a Netflix film that came out a while ago. It's very good. Worth watching. And in that, there's a thing about it of like the people who like see themselves as, you know, real foodies, people who are like deeply ingrained in the whole culture of fine dining, and they know everything about it and they want to explain everything about it. They're the worst. Like, they kill the magic of it. And it's the same thing with Call of Duty, where like the people who are like super invested in it, where like that's their whole personality, is that they play Call of Duty, are like the least interesting people to talk to Call of Duty about, like talk to about Call of Duty. They're like, they would be the worst people for the creatives, you know, and they generally hate the developers and they hate the companies that make these things. It's a really weird thing. It is justified to hate Jared Leto, that is true. I was just surprised that his fan club hate him so much. Um, the Dungeons and Dragons subreddit is a pretty positive place. I remember, this is a bit of a tangent, and I apologize because I know we've already run over time. I remember when the Dungeons and Dragons movie came out, I fell into a bit of a rabbit hole reading about the Dungeons and Dragons subreddit. That apparently there's like 2 Dungeons and Dragons big subreddits. I don't know this. Like, I'm not involved in it at all. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons in my life. But this was from an outside perspective. This is what I read about it. That there's essentially 2 Dungeons and Dragons subreddits. And there's like a newer one that is much more kind of involved with the creators and stuff like that. And it's like, I think this similar thing happened in Magic the Gathering as well, and I'm worried I might be conflating these 2 things, like merging them. But one of them is like more sort of commercial, and it's more just sort of like, oh yeah, like everything that gets released is great. And then there's this other one that's kind of the old fans, you know, the people who see themselves as the hardcore fans. And they're like a bunch of incels who are like super angry that in marketing materials they show like girls playing Dungeons and Dragons or Magic the Gathering or whatever it was. And it's like they're like, this isn't realistic. Only white men play Dungeons and Dragons, and have turned into this weird racist misogynist group of people who are super angry that the company is trying to court different audiences. And yeah, I just thought that was really funny. And it was like, again, it was like this, the idea, like the hardcore fans have been rejected by the creators, and now they've turned into like trolls, essentially, but like literal trolls. This sort of weird underground thing. And I just think it happens everywhere. Anywhere people get obsessed and turn it into their whole personality, they're always bad. You know, super hardcore Metallica fans, the worst to talk to about Metallica, because they'll just tell you, you know, only the Black Album is good. All of the modern stuff is terrible. It's just, yeah, it's just the way of things. It's just always the way of things. And you know what it's like with Call of Duty and zombies and everything like that. The people who are having fun with Call of Duty are the people who just play it like once or twice a week and have a laugh. They're the people who enjoy Call of Duty. They're the people who are giving the developers lots of money. They're the people who are excited when new stuff comes out, and you know, they are excited for a new trailer and stuff like that. The people who are obsessive are like reading loads of leaks and data mines and speculating over every little thing, analyzing every change to the nth degree, talking about how incompetent they think all of the developers are, and they hate the game when they play the game. Like, oh, it's laggy, oh, the meta sucks, like, oh, people are camping, people are drop shotting, people are sweats, people are noobs, people are tryhards. They're not having any fun. They've just, there's a line, like, I think there's an imaginary line of how into something you can be. And I'm trying desperately hard with Call of Duty to cling on to that line, to be like, yes, I'm invested in Call of Duty. Yes, I care about it. And I care about it more than I should. And I'm constantly trying to claw back my way to a point where I have fun with the game and where I don't care about it. Like, that's what I want. I want to not care about Call of Duty. I just want to enjoy it as a video game. And it's hard because making content and talking to everyone and making videos about stuff is always dragging me back down into the depths of caring way too much about it and not enjoying it and picking it apart and being cynical about it. And then you have to like shake yourself a little bit. And I'm really lucky that I've got my wife. My wife's really good at it. That sometimes I'll come down from being up here and like she'll be like, what's wrong? Like, you seem really tense. And I'll be like, oh, I was arguing with someone on Twitter or Discord or something. And it's like, why? Like, who are they? And I was like, I don't know, just some stranger. And it's like, she's really good at just being like, what are you doing? Like, why are you mad about this? And it's like so good to just have something to like ground you, something to be like, oh yeah, this doesn't matter, it's a video game. And like, I think some people genuinely don't have that. Like, they don't have someone in their life to kind of bring them back to reality. It's part of the reason, you know, why I like when me and Johnny and Emil and Namegear and Arrow and people, when we play together, like one of the nice things is that I see the game in a whole new thing where it's like, I'm like, oh yeah, like, you know, don't forget to do this because of this feature. And they're like, what? And they don't know about like the new things that have come to Call of Duty. They don't know about the new releases, the new patch notes, the new meta, the new controversy, like the lag problems or whatever like that. They don't know anything about that. They just hop on and play the game. And it's like, that's a much healthier way to play the game rather than, you know, I hop on with people who play Call of Duty all day, every day. And it's like, just gets miserable. it just gets like unbelievably tiring. And I'm sure with Diablo, I'll do the same thing. I'll just sink into a Diablo hole. I'll sink into the depths of hell. I'll get too into it and I'll start caring about the percentage changes on some skill or some item, and something will seem OP to me, or something will seem too grindy, or there'll be some bug, and then I'll end up having a miserable time of it. And I need all of you who are going to watch me. I'm going to be streaming at midnight tonight. I'm going to be there straight away midnight. I need you to just say to me, like, chill out, just enjoy yourself. It's just a game. If you're getting fed up, just go to bed, go to sleep. Because it doesn't matter. The game will be there in the morning. Tonight, I'm probably going to play Diablo, and I'll probably play it for like 4 hours tonight, and I'll be super tired, and I'll start getting grouchy, and I just need someone to be like, just go to sleep. Just leave it. It doesn't matter. No one cares when I get to level 100 in Diablo. No one cares when I finish the story, or when I get to like do whatever endgame content there is. Nobody cares. Nobody. It's just like, I found this a lot with Call of Duty when I was doing the raid. Where last time the episode 3 of the raid came out and me and Scott and Flynn did it, and we were like, I was not enjoying it, to be honest. I was getting a bit annoyed about it and a bit stressed. And then I was thinking like, oh, we need to get it done, like, oh, I need to get it downloaded, I need to get it started. And it's like, if I hadn't have done that, no one would have cared. Nothing would have changed. It's not like I made any money from doing it early. It's not like I got like loads of viewers from doing it early or anything like that. All I did was stress myself out. And so next time a raid comes out, it's like, I'll do it sometime. I don't care. Like when this DMZ update comes out, I'll like, yeah, I'll play it sometime. I'll play it. I'll play it probably the evening it comes out, because I'll be excited about seeing whatever new stuff there is. But I'm not going to be like stressing about it. You need to claw your way back to the line. I need to like make an emoji, don't I, of the line. Just a line of people so people can spam it and be like, hey, remember the line? Claw your way back out of hell to the line of enjoying a game like a normal person. And this is where, and I've had this conversation lots ever since, like, I had those arguments with Charlie Intel and Jay God and people a while ago, where they were talking about, like, oh, the game's being ruined by casuals, and like, oh, and they were moaning about everything. And like, oh, this is just serving casuals, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, arguing a bit against that, saying like, hey, but actually the stuff that you're saying is for casuals is just more fun. It's just better for more people. And that really, I didn't know how to put it into words, but that's what I was talking about, is getting back to that line, that those are people on the other side of the line, in the Elysium, like they're in the grass is always greener side. They're in the promised land of, they are having fun with the game, and the developers are making stuff for the people that enjoy the game. And that's good. That's what they should be doing. And then we're all here in the depths below the line being like, oh, you don't understand it. You're not, you're not deep within it. You're not understanding. Imagine like a cruise ship, a lovely cruise ship, where it's like the people who are enjoying the cruise ship are the people who are on the decks, on the restaurants, having a lovely time, just enjoying it. They don't know or care what problems the cruise ship has. They don't care about what's happening down below, how it works, or anything like that. And then imagine the people in the engine room. They're miserable. They're like, they know exactly all of the problems with it. They've got all of the noise, all of the cacophony, all of the information about how this cruise ship works. It doesn't add to their enjoyment at all. It's just stuff about how it works. You want to be the people at the top. You don't want to be the people in the engine room. You don't want to be the people down there. Some people, like the developers, have to be there. They're the equivalents of the engineers on a cruise ship. They have to be in the engine room. They have to know all of this stuff. They have to be aware of how it all works and try to fix things. But imagine, like, what we're doing, the Call of Duty people who spend all their time talking about things like skill-based matchmaking and lag compensation and server tick rates and metas and stuff like that. We're like passengers who have paid to go on a cruise and decided to spend the whole bloody cruise in the engine room. Just like sitting there with all of the noise, constantly asking the engineers what's going on, how's the ship working, and then the engineers are too busy to tell us, and we're like, but we have a right to know, we paid for this cruise, we need to know how the cruise ship works. And they're like, just go and enjoy yourselves, go to the pool, go to the restaurants. And we're like, no, we want to know how it works. And it's like, why are we doing this to ourselves? Why? We paid for the nice thing, go and enjoy the nice thing, go do that instead. Would be much, much better. Jonathan Crouch says, I don't know, I just read your old name there. I guess that hardcore players are the ones sitting in the sun lounger reading Twitter updates from the engine room. No, I think the hardcore players are the ones who have forced their way into the engine room or are desperately trying to force their way into the engine room. They're not on a sun lounger. The people like me are the ones sitting on a sun lounger reading the updates from the engine room. You know, we've got a little live feed on our phone where it's like, oh, rudder free. I don't know how many rudders a boat has, probably just one. Like, engine free is having a little bit of difficulty today. And it's like, why do you care? As long as the boat's moving, who cares? And if the boat stops, someone will tell you what's going on and they'll sort something out for you, or they won't and you'll have to get off. It doesn't matter. This is I'm proud of this analogy. I think this is how it's going. So sorry, I've been on a lot of rants today. I don't know why. It's because I'm excited about Diablo. Because weirdly, because I'm in a good mood, it's made me more ranty. So yeah. Go for a meal. Yeah, exactly, House. You don't want to know about what's going on in the kitchen. Just enjoy the meal. You don't need to know how it all works. Anyway, I'm going to try and turn this into some elaborate tweet that will get no notice. But, you know, we'll see how it goes. So yeah, so that's... we're talking about Call of Duty, talking about DMZ. We were talking about bloody engine room stuff. We can ignore that. Really, the tweet from Infinity Ward, just see that in our cruise ship analogy of they're talking about a future port that wasn't what we expected. It's a change of the itinerary. And we can worry about why there was a change of an itinerary of what. We can go down to the engine room and ask, you know, oh, what's going on? Why is this happening? Or we can just be like, okay, maybe it'll be all right. We'll see. Maybe we won't like it and we'll go home. Who knows? We'll see. I mean, I try, Melee Beast, always try, but clawing back to that line is hard. Trying to get out of the engine room is hard. Once you're in there and you know how it works, trying to forget about it, trying to get back up to those pools or back up to the sun lounger is hard. Finally, final bit of news today, which isn't really news. It's just me letting you know. It's Diablo night. Diablo's coming out. Look, Diablo. Also, my hand just disappeared then. Whoa, there we go. Diablo. Diablo's coming out. It's coming out midnight tonight, UK time. I'm going to be streaming then, so I'm going to like do a video after this, and then I'm going to not stream for the rest of the day because I'm going to be streaming late tonight. I'm really excited about Diablo. For anyone who's wondering like what my kind of content plans are, because I know that's what you want, those juicy content plans. I'm going to be playing Diablo as a druid, and just kind of, I want to play through it really absorbing the story. So my stream is going to be very, because I know you've got lots of streams to choose from. My stream, I'm not going to be rushing it. I'm going to be doing every quest I can. I'm going to be listening to the quest, talking about the quests and the story, reading all of the stuff that I can, watching all the cutscenes, all of that kind of stuff. So we're going to be taking it slow. I've already rushed through it like 6 times, the opening of the game. I don't want to do that again. So I'm going to take it slow, do all of the story, play as a druid, have some fun, like have a bit of a laugh, not take it too seriously. That's the plan. And then I might do some guide stuff and videos and stuff like that on my YouTube channel next week. You know, stuff like, hey, this is a fun druid build I've made, stuff like that. We might do stuff like that, or this is a cool thing that I found. And then after I've finished, you know, this playthrough on a druid, then I'll start doing some quicker ones where we do some hardcore runs and stuff like that. I will also, for anyone else who is going to be playing Diablo, I will also be setting up like a guild, whatever you call it, a clan. I can't remember what they call it in the game. I'll be setting one of those up, so just come into the stream and then I'll tell you what it's called and everything like that. So you'll be able to join that if you need people to play with. I'll be looking for people to play with from it, so that should be fun. All of that stuff is cross-platform, so you can join it on whatever platform you want and then play, and that'll be a lot of fun. So, and if anybody wants to join in with what I'm doing today, feel free, although be aware, I will be watching every cutscene, I will be reading everything, I'll be playing exceptionally slowly, probably. So, if you want to join in, there will be space to do that. So, thank you very much, everyone who's been watching today. Hope you enjoyed the sort of 2 big rants that we had. And I will, like I said, I'm going to do a video about the DMZ news next. So, if you could give that a watch and a like and a comment, that's much appreciated. That's awesome. And then you can catch me later on twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes. Twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes. I said this the other day on Twitter, but I massively appreciate everybody who comes to watch stuff when I'm not playing Call of Duty. I know a lot of you followed me for Call of Duty. The people who come and watch me play Diablo, you are the absolute best. I am so happy. So thank you in advance to everyone that comes and watches me play some Diablo and supports that stream. You will also be able to get some Twitch drops if you want to play Diablo yourself. by watching me stream, you will earn some cosmetic stuff for your Diablo enjoyment. That'll be good. Right, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Oh, there won't be a podcast tomorrow because I'll be playing Diablo. Catch me on Twitch instead. See you then. Goodbye.